Just have a story for you. David Sachs had the misfortune to send me a friend request on Facebook during my second Facebook phase, which was my real friend Facebook phase. I had 4 stages of Facebook. The first stage was old friends. When I first got on Facebook, I found all my old friends. That was awesome. Then I had this stage where I started getting requests from people I didn't really know. I thought, no, I want this to be my real friends. So if you sent me a friend request, I would try to figure out if we'd actually ever met in person and had some kind of friendly exchange. If not, I had an auto-reply programmed into my computer that with one keystroke, I could politely say, I don't think we've actually met, and I'm trying to keep Facebook to be my real friends. This was emotionally exhausting to send these little automatic replies. So then I got to my give up and accept all friend request stages, and that was stage 3 that got to 5,000 friends, which is the most you can have. And stage 4, which I'm currently in, is no longer on Facebook. And I've never been more free in my life, brothers. David sent me a friend request during stage 2, the real friend stage, and his name was familiar and we had a few mutual friends, but I didn't think we'd ever met, so I sent him my auto-reply, rejected him, only to realize that he was my neighbor. Not my next door neighbor, but he lived less than a mile away, and actually we had some dear friends in common. And he was the kind of person that I really needed to be friends with, and he really wanted to be friends with me. And fortunately, he persevered, and we became real friends, not just Facebook friends. David was an artist. He was an internationally acclaimed photographer, both very successful as a commercial artist, commercial photographer, and as a fine art photographer. And David and I were living in the suburbs of Philadelphia. He'd built his career in New York, met his wife in New York, and moved back to Delaware County, Pennsylvania, where he'd grown up, in order to have a place to raise his 4 kids. We were neighbors in this part of the world where it's, in the suburbs of Philadelphia, it's not that easy to be an artist. To be a writer, a musician, which I am, to be a photographer, an artist, which David was. And so we bonded over that, got to know each other well. We started getting together every other week, talked everything, talked about working with agents, talked about what it was like to be creative, talked about marriage, talked about fatherhood. David had played varsity squash at University of Pennsylvania. I had played squash with indulgent friends, so he beat me joyfully and repeatedly at squash. I got to know his family. I have a picture of them, I think, that we could share with you. David and his wife, Angie, and their 4 kids, living in this wonderful house. And I discovered that my neighbor had the great gift of friendship. The great gift of friendship. He was just a natural at being a friend. And he wanted to be my friend. David had grown up in our county. I had not. He had lots of connections. He had this gift for friendship. Everybody was drawn to David and Angie. And I started to realize I was being invited into this wonderful community that's centered around this family. And a couple years after I first met him, we got an invitation to their December Christmas party. And I thought this was a great chance for my wife and kids to get to know them a little better. And so we got dressed up in our Christmas party attire and drove the short distance to the Sachs' house and walked in. And this house, custom built by David's uncle, was full of wonderful people having a great time together. I'm the only thing close to an extrovert in my family. My wife and kids are much more introverted, and I am pretty introverted myself, really. And we walked in, we didn't really know anyone except David and Angie, and you know how this is, the hosts are busy. My kids were 13 and 10. It's an awkward age to be plunged into a Christmas party. And I kind of watched my kids looking a little lost, and I felt a little lost. And I wasn't sure my wife was having a great time. I found my way to David and Angie and said hello, and then they were quickly swept off into the swirl of the party. And about 15 minutes after we got there, I made a decision that will make no sense to you yet. I gathered up my kids, I grabbed my kids, I found Catherine, I said, let's get out of here, let's just go home. And kind of rushed them out. of the party that was just getting started. And swore to myself and only to myself that I was never going back in that house. Why did I do that? Well, obviously, it was because of shame. It was because of the defining event of my life. When I was 12 years old, my dad, who taught at Syracuse University, was denied tenure. That means you're out of that job and you get to look for one more academic job. And he found another academic job at a business school called Babson College in the suburbs of Boston. And we moved to a town called Needham, Massachusetts, where I started high school, at Needham High School. A very different place from the small town in central New York where I'd grown up to that point. And there are two ways to tell the story of my high school years in Needham. And they're both true. One is that I absolutely flourished. My first week of high school, I became a Christian. I never really heard the gospel, discovered this little group of kids who knew Jesus, knew the power of the Spirit. I wanted that so much. And they welcomed me in. We became deep friends. I saw one of them just this week. God was at work in that New England high school. I grew in every way. It was a target-rich environment for a reasonably talented, motivated kid. I flourished, that's true. And I never was sure I belonged. Partly because my family really didn't belong. My sister was 2 years younger than me. I started ninth grade. She started sixth grade. And she was plunged into the shark tank of affluent suburban middle school as a girl. My father and my mother struggled to make friends. My father's job did not go well. He did not get tenure the second time. 2 strikes and you're out in the academic world. Both of these things were true. I was flourishing and I was connecting, and I was experiencing profound disconnection at the same time. I feel a little twinge of it here. This organization with its roots in prosperous suburbs of New England, it brings back what I realized were the 3 great mysteries of my life as I lived in Needham. What is it like to be successful, I wondered. What is it like to be a successful man, I wondered. Maybe most deeply, what is it like to have a successful dad? And those questions and that powerful experience of connection and disconnection became the little engine of my life. I think everybody has a little engine. At least every ambitious person has a little engine. And that engine took me to Cornell, where I flourished, thrived, learned, grew. Took me back to Boston, ended up working at Harvard for 10 years, accompanying Harvard students, undergrads, through their life of faith, because I was powered by this little engine that on the one hand was tremendously energizing and empowering. It powered a tremendous drive to connect with promising and potentially successful people and to understand their world and to bring the gospel to bear on their world and to become their friend and to care for them. And that little engine and that drive is why when James Anderson called, I said yes to be here. And at the same time, that combination of connection and disconnection from that formative stage in my life sometimes was paralyzing. And it was that paralyzing part that hit me in that house that December night in 2010. And I just decided I can't handle this. I cannot handle this friendship. I cannot handle being friends with someone who's so popular. I can't handle being friends with someone who's so successful, has such a great family. I am just going to disengage from this guy and from this family and from this whole world that I don't even know if I want to be part of. And I had a great excuse because I was actually pretty successful myself. I was really busy. Being successful gives you lots of excuses to disengage from people. David was busy. He was traveling all over the world. It was hard enough to try to make our every 2-week rhythm of getting together. I just sort of started giving him non-committal answers when he'd send a text message asking if we wanted to connect. I'm a little busy. Let's try later. It was all very, very carefully neutral, passive, not angry, conflict avoidant. I didn't see David for 10 months. We'd met for several years every 2 weeks, talked about everything in our lives, and for 10 months I managed not to see him. And I was very set on having that continue, and I made just one mistake in this plan that I almost didn't admit to myself that I had made. I didn't tell my wife about this plan. And my wife really liked Angie, really liked the family, knew I loved David. So she kept trying to get us together, and I kept trying to frustrate those, but eventually she succeeded. October 6th through 2011, I happen to know the date because it was the date of one of the greatest moments of professional success in my life to that point. It was a Friday. I just turned in a piece that would show up the next day in the Wall Street Journal, 2 pages on the front page of the Wall Street Journal Review, the most prestigious spot in weekend journalism. And we brought Prosecco and had dinner with David and Angie, and they had no idea. And for some reason, I very vividly remember that night. I remember David's red baseball cap, and I remember the way they listened to us and the way we listened to them and all the things we talked about, and my heart just began to soften. I thought, what have I been doing? These people want to be our friends. And my heart softened a little bit. October was busy. Didn't see David, but not so much because of avoidance, just fullness of life. October 31st, I got a text message from David in the afternoon. This is what it said. I'm at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. Room so-and-so. I have lung cancer. Please don't tell anyone else. Please call. David did not have lung cancer. He had cancer in his lungs. It was cancer of unknown primary. That means they never found out where it came from, but it was stage 4 at this point, which means it wasn't just in his lungs. It was in his spleen. It was in his bones. It was all over. And that began what I think I would say is the most astonishing year of my life, because we do have ways to hold this stuff at bay for a while. And Kurt said this yesterday about his own brother. Cancer is the worst thing that'll ever happen to you, but I think my friend David would say cancer was the best thing that ever happened to him. And it was certainly astonishing for our friendship and for many other friendships in the Sachs family. Because in this experience, with all its ups and downs of treatment, and I can't recount to you all that is in that, but many of you know it, David wanted me with him. And I wanted to be with him. And he got a good year, an amazing year. Thousands of people learned this story. Facebook turned out to host an unbelievable group called the Inner Circle that actually had thousands of people in it, in which we all shared this story of this family coming to terms with a dad and husband's sickness, likely prognosis. Love was poured out in unbelievable ways. David and I started getting together all the time. We decided we wanted to watch each other's favorite movies, so he showed me The Thin Red Line, and I showed him Il Postino. We drank fantastic wine from his very fine collection. That amazing year came to an end. The drug stopped working. Hospice was the next choice. And in the spring of 2013, David was at home, and sorry about that. And I got to spend the last week of David's life, many nights of that last week, in his bedroom, which is where he was. I have a lot of friends, some of them really dear friends. Almost none of them have been in my and my wife's bedroom. And I got to sit there night after night. My friend was very, very ill, very reduced. He looked like he was about 70 years old. He was 45. I sat there with his brother. We sang 10,000 Reasons, the first song we sang here, I think, or one of the first. We prayed. It was the most holy place I've ever been. One night, David really wanted to use the bathroom. He was not really in condition to do this. He really didn't want to use the diaper. It was just his wife, Angie, and his brother, Adam, and I was sitting there, I was thinking, I don't think I should be in the room for this. And I was thinking, and Adam and Angie were trying to help David get to the bathroom. I said, maybe I should step out. And Angie said, no, this is what's happening. We want you here. I witnessed the most astonishing, intimate act of care in the most astonishing moment of vulnerability. Unbelievable privilege. We buried David on a breezy April day. There he waits for the resurrection of the body and the restoration of all things, as one day I will wait, as one day we all will wait. I have his last text message on my phone, last text message to me. It says, I love you, Andy. Second only to my marriage, this is the greatest grace of my life. David never knew the reason that he didn't see me for 10 months. And I wondered about that. I thought about telling him. I could have told him. It never came up. There were other more important things to talk about. And for a while I wondered if I should regret that. But Mark Batterson helped me understand this on Friday night. Those 10 months just are not in the highlight reel, edited by the God of grace. Were those 10 months a loss? Yes, they were. Were they sin? Oh, yes. Was that about shame? Yes, indeed. Was it all rescued? Completely. Was it forgiven before I could even ask? Totally. Did it stop God from his loving purposes in my life? Not even remotely. I'm healed. 3 years ago, my friend Tom called me up. He's one of those Harvard successful people that I find so mysterious. And he said, Andy, I really need some friends. So we gathered a little group of friends. We all have complicated lives, but we're committed to meet in an intentional way, intensive way every year. Just did it in January again. And our intention is to meet this way for the rest of our lives and disclose everything about our lives. And we had to come up with a name for our group, we decided. So we decided to call ourselves the eulogists. The eulogists. Eulogist is someone who gives a eulogy. And our goal with our little group is to have someone or a few someones who know each of us well enough to give the eulogy at our funeral and give a full account of our lives. Someone who knows all the dimensions of our life and can give that eulogy, and to hold one another accountable to live the kind of lives that would be worth a eulogy. They know things about my life and my heart that I will never share from this or any other stage because they involve other people in ways too painful to share, or because they're too precious and holy to be shared without full intimacy. But the eulogists know those things about my life. Tom and Paul and Scott and my other brother eulogists know. Thanks be to God.